So we're going to talk about effective leadership strategies. And I think both William and Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, but both of you did take part one and also took part two. And Thomas, I'm not sure if you took part one. Is that correct?
Yeah, I haven't taken part one.
Okay. But in each of the, so by the way, come Wednesday or Thursday, both William and Gail and some others who will join us tomorrow will be graduating. So I bring that up because leadership is something that we talk about in every session of RGA. There's leadership in part one, and there's leadership in part two, and then leadership here. And it's one of those topics that kind of builds on itself. So each module that talks about leadership kind of builds on the previous ones. And it actually reinforces that here in the outline. So we start with the kind of the starting point. As I further my Rotary journey, I will examine my own leadership style, engage in more complex and skillful use of my leadership skills, and seize opportunities to lead. Hey, Gail, did you seize an opportunity to lead?
Oh, I jumped all over it. You bet.
So that's kind of the overview of the session, and there's three goals. And this first goal is to build on previous topics in RGA. So take things that we've talked about before. And Thomas, because you took part two and not part one yet, a lot of what we got in part two will have been a refresh for part one. But insights into leadership, team building, that was the one with the coat of arms, and club communication. So there were quite a few topics on leadership that will kind of feed into this. But this is really more about your personal leadership styles and how to get buy-in for things that you want to see done. So it's a little more personal. Improve our ability to lead and communicate in group settings. And identify ways we can win support for our goals and proposals. And I know there were some discussion in part two about how important buy-in is, that if we come in and we want to do something that's against the grain of the club, maybe it's something that would be really good for the club to do, but they haven't done it before and they're kind of in a comfort zone, you have to find a way to get them really interested in it. If you just barrel through and they're not interested in it, it could actually be detrimental to whatever it is that you want to work on. So we're going to talk about effective leadership strategies, and I do want to hear from you all. And Dom, I know you're still on the phone and you were on the call, and you were a great leader with the Albuquerque Club. Is what your personal strategies are. So for Gail, you're currently the president. Thomas, you're president-elect. So this is a good chance to kind of think about your own style. How do you approach leadership at the club? How do you get consensus, or what the module calls coalition? How do you build coalitions? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop this document for a few minutes and bring up a little notepad. So hopefully you can all see this. Mm-hmm. So we want to get some thoughts about your own leadership strategies, your approaches, what has worked for you, maybe what hasn't worked for you. So why don't you go ahead and throw out things that from your own experience have worked for you, and each of you can contribute here.
Well, Jeff, I've always found that a convincing argument about why something is important is always the first step in the consensus building. I have to feel strongly about something and the importance of it with a good argument and reinforcing background information so that I can get some consensus building within my team or within my group or club.
Have any of you been in a situation where in order to get something through, you had to make that convincing argument, where you really had to get people on board with a convincing argument, whereas otherwise it would not have gone through?
Yeah, and actually, I've tried to utilize somebody other than myself as president. I don't want to come across as I'm pounding my idea to the club. So I like drawing in an expert in, I'll give you an example. We are trying to do a fundraiser this year for a local community thing, and that is to buy it's a literacy program used to help children improve their reading skills. So having the school leader come in and actually share with the club, why is this a need? What's it going to do for the students, and what's the impact going to overall be? So utilizing someone to come in sometimes I think is a more effective way than like me pounding my idea at the club.
I totally agree. I share the same views on that. Bring the people in who have a better understanding, may be able to make that case stronger than the club president or the committee chair. I think that's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I tell you, Jeff, something I encountered recently here. So I'm going to pick up my skirts and show you my socks here. I mentioned that we received, the club president received an email about co-funding for this young person's membership initiative. The current president didn't seem too interested, but the incoming president, who is much younger, seemed very interested. And even though we sort of had a formal vote to not do something this year, some of us in the background said, well, maybe let's revisit this. And it's the president. Yeah, you're exactly right. The president's interest versus maybe the overall club interest. That dynamic is sometimes very, very interesting.
Yep. It's interesting. The last year at the district conference, I believe, Tom Walker said something to the effect of, "This is not my year. This is a year, and we don't want to just be thinking about this is, the district governor's year, or for Gail and the Clovis Club, this is her year. She's the president of the club for a year, and then someone's going to step in, and you want that smooth transition." But sometimes the president and the president-elect have different interests, different priorities. So when we talked about planning in part 2, that idea of the smooth transition, and if the president-elect really is interested in something, and the president may not be, the president-elect can run with it, even if if the president thinks it's a great idea, or it can say, we have a lot on our plate right now. It may be hard to get a few other things going on. Let's table that for next year. You're going to be president of the club that time anyway, and but I think it's interesting that we tend to think about it as, what am I going to accomplish?
Exactly.
Or what, make it very personal, when in many cases it's the club accomplishing, and the club leader is kind of fostering all of that.
Well, and I agree. Sometimes the current club president is sort of myopic in what's from, how does it enhance me? How does it, whatever, rather than looking at the good of the community, the good of the club, or the future. And maybe that's human nature, but I've been around enough people to know that happens more often than not.
So, Thomas, you are a president-elect, is that correct?
Yes.
So, and I'm not sure if you had a leadership position in the club before, but how is the relationship with you? You don't have to get personal about it, but how is the relationship between you and the current president? And are you starting to think about or focus on your term and how you're going to approach leadership that may, let's say, be different than the current president?
Yes and yes. The challenge we have in Tucumcari, and it may be the same in the other cities in our region, is we're a very small club. We probably only have a dozen or so members that are relatively consistent attenders, and the challenge we have is finding kind of the manpower to do things, I guess, in a way. And so we really have tried to focus this year on, and the current president's tried to focus this year on getting us back in a routine. We used to have an air show here, which was before I came to Tucumcari, which was kind of the club's big fundraiser every year, big community event, big kind of service project. And that for a number of legitimate reasons no longer happens. So we're looking at trying to find another project that we can take on as a club that will be a fundraiser, community enhancement kind of project. But I think it's probably going to be something that even during my tenure as president, I don't know if it's realistic to say that it will happen, because we're really in the stage now of just getting back to convincing everyone that that's a worthwhile endeavor for the club, and then working on planning. And I think our planning, I know it sounds like I'm making excuses, but our planning takes probably a little bit longer because of the fact that we're so small, and we just don't have, we have to really concentrate on finding resources.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I have been thinking about that, and I think that the current president and myself are fairly new to the club. So our approach has been somewhat, let's work together and almost make our presidencies one presidency over a 2-year period, and work on that. And then we just elected a new president-elect who I'm really excited about, because he's a former president at another club in New Mexico.
Oh, excellent.
And I think can bring a lot in terms of giving us not only helping me next year, but then really, if we can form a good foundation over the rest of this year and next year, then he can probably put things into action and actually start doing some things for us.
That's fantastic. Dom, are you with us?
Sorry, what'd you say?
I was asking, since you were recently the president of the Albuquerque Club, is there anything you can add about leadership strategies, perhaps what your general approach is or was, and now that it's been a couple of years, what you learned about leadership with a Rotary Club?
Well, one thing I can talk about when it comes to leadership strategies is the fact that you truly need to do some advanced planning. I learned that while I was the president-elect and watched what was going on, so that I could think about where I was going during my year.
Yep.
You got to have a game plan going in, because your board is going to look to you for that kind of leadership.
Agreed. One of the things that's great about, District Governor-elect Dave has really been pushing president-elects to go through the Rio Grande Academy, partly because it provides an opportunity before the term starts to think about things like leadership and planning and all of that. So he's really been making a push to have this be part of the preparation time.
Hey, Jeffrey, can I ask a question?
Yes, Gail.
Somebody can go through this more than once, right?
Yes. Now, if they go through it more than once, they're observing, because they may have already gotten their certificate. But yes, you can go through RGA. In fact, a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but a good number of people who graduate then become facilitators, because being a facilitator is a great way to learn as well.
Mm-hmm.
So people can take it again. They can also become facilitators. But yes.
Okay. And the reason I ask, I'm trying to encourage all new members to go through RGA, but I think as they advance through Rotary and get into the board, that would be a good time for them to go through again, just to kind of refresh and.
Yes. That's another reason why, with this distance learning model, we make videos of all these presentations, because if they've already gone through it once, they can still watch the videos and they can kind of see what's going on, because we've got them all documented. So that's another advantage in having all these RGA sessions on YouTube.
Right.
One thing I wanted to add, and I know there are a number of clubs around that do this, and I think it's a great idea, but it may not be something that works for all clubs. But a number of clubs will have PEs run the club's big project. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we have our big fundraiser every year. The president-elect is going to chair that committee. And then they just rotate through. So every year, whoever the president-elect is chairs that big fundraiser, whatever it is that the club does. The advantage that they then have is the president-elects get a sense of the dynamics of the club. Who are the workers? Who are the idea people? Who are the ones that just kind of sit there like this with their arms crossed, and you really can't push them to get any work done? So the idea of the PEs running the big project, they really get a chance to better understand the interests and the personalities of the people that they're going to be president for the following year.
Jeff, that's absolutely right. We have what we call our charity selection committee, and the PE is responsible for chairing that. And it absolutely does do exactly what you're talking about. It gets them in on the initial planning phase of the project, and it's kind of giving that individual end-to-end responsibility and a good chance to see, like you said, who can do what.
Yeah, Jeff, if I could follow that up, assuming we're working on Vegas rules here tonight.
Yes.
Our incoming president, he and I have had some very interesting conversations, because he has been asked to head up some of these initiatives, but he wasn't aware of some of the club dynamics, as was I not as well, because I'm a new member. But just the informal discussions we have, it helps him put his new board together for next year. Who can do what? Who's willing to do what?
Right.
Some people are willing to do something, but only because it's like a last resort. They're asked to do it, so they'll do it. And that's what he's trying to build. He's trying to build a group that wants to do what they're asked to do. And so he's finding this whole dynamic is very interesting. He's a younger man, but he's finding the whole process very interesting.
I'm an assistant governor this year, and one of the clubs that I'm the assistant governor for, it's a great club with a great president. That president is very new. And I think when he became president, he had only been in that club for 6 months. And he's doing a great job, but a lot of the time that he and I have spoken was really just to kind of get him comfortable with that role, because he didn't know the group. It's a small club, so he got to know them fairly quickly, but still he didn't have that period of time to observe and learn and kind of see how things go. So if a president-elect has that opportunity to observe and learn, plus the planning that Dom talked about, they'll typically be in a better position to then assume the role of president. Gail, when you were president-elect, what did that year entail? Were you involved in managing a big project, or were you in a kind of an observational role where you can kind of see how things were getting done and kind of use that to prepare for your year?
No, I was actually leading our big fundraising project, our Rotary Arts in the Park event. So I got involved in that, leading it again this year. But I am doing a handoff to Mike So that, but I'm still going to be there to help make sure that, you know, I don't leave them hanging, just so
Right.
there's a good handoff and stuff. But yeah, so I had an opportunity to do that and get a head start on seeing the dynamics that you talk about.
And Thomas, what about, given your year as president-elect, are you, you know, with your membership, are you feeling comfortable that you know kind of you've had a chance to observe and kind of see how they operate so that when your year starts, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you can expect out of them, or who's going to roll up their sleeves and who may need to be, where that convincing argument may need to be made?
Yeah, I think so. I think the other big thing is that they've had a year to kind of get to understand me a little bit better. And, you know, one of the interesting dynamics, and we've had this conversation in the club, is that with my occupation, there are times during the year when I travel. For instance, I spend quite a bit of time at the legislature during the legislative sessions, and so we have, you know, we've you know, I guess for lack of better terms, come to understanding of you know, the fact that that there may be times when I'm the absent president, and I'll have to call on others to make sure that the weekly meetings run smoothly and those sort of things. But so that's, you know, I think as much as me sizing up the club this year, the club has been sizing me up and making sure that we all have the right expectations.
Very smart. And as you were saying that, it dawned on me also that you want to make sure you've got an effective board, if at all possible, because if you don't, you end up having to manage a lot of stuff that really should be managed by committees and other things. So if you are spending the time preparing for that year as president and you feel really comfortable about the board, they know their assignments, they know what they need to work on, that's just going to make the year much more a much more successful year. But that's another thing. During that year leading up to your year as president, that's a great time to really focus on those board roles and assignments and committees and all that structure. And then come July 1st, you're off and running. So, all right, what I wanted to do, so that's a very nice discussion about your own kind of personal strategies and so on. What I want to do for a few minutes, there's a really nice insert in this module. Bring that up really quick. This building a coalition. This is one page out of a Rotary manual that was inserted into this this module, and it talks about building a coalition, which is kind of like that, you know, making a compelling argument and bringing people together. You know, it's interesting. I think we talked in part 2 about why diversity was important in a Rotary Club. But with that diversity sometimes comes a challenge to build a coalition. Because the strength of the diverse group of people, that they all have to come together to focus on something that may be difficult. So there are some questions here that we kind of talked about building coalitions, but if you have a chance, take a look at this one pager. I think it's outstanding. And you know, for a lot of the work that we do, we really do want to make sure we have a coalition. I'm a facilitator for town halls in the state, and I was telling a friend of mine last week that I hadn't thought about it for years, but I was up in Farmington, and we had a town hall on energy policy, and we had the oil and gas industry was there, and the environmentalists were there. It's pretty much the total audience was either oil and gas or environmentalists. And yet the whole purpose of the town hall was to come together and agree on policy that would then go to the legislature. And we had to build coalitions. Not everyone got everything that they wanted, but the focus had to be, well, what can we agree to? And what can we live with? And what can we stand behind? And what can we defend? You know, we didn't want the group to leave and the oil and gas people went off and did their thing and the environmentalists went off and did their thing. But what can we agree to? So building a coalition, I think, is really important, especially if you have a very diverse group of folks to work with. Dom, Albuquerque's a pretty big club. Any issues with building coalitions there? Dom?
Yeah, I'm trying to get myself back here.
Got it.
To answer your question, no, I don't think we've really had a problem with that.
Gail, how about you and Clovis? Do you find that you need to build some coalitions to get some of these projects going, or is everyone pretty much on the same page going in?
No, I feel like we do need to build a coalition, and I can't prove that I've necessarily been super effective at that. We've got such an age range as in our club, as well as newer versus more tenured folks, and getting everybody to feel the same about a project is tricky. I can't say we've been great at it, but I do see the value in it. But moreover, I'd like to learn how to be better at it.
So this page, I think, would be great then for you.
Yeah.
And also, Thomas, as your president-elect year, there's some really excellent points here. I really like this, list what each party wants out of the situation, really get a sense of where people are coming from. It's not my way or the highway. Brainstorm new solutions, get people involved. If you've got a diverse group, and they're not involved in figuring out what's going to happen, they're less likely to buy in because they weren't in the first place. So if you get their ideas early on, that may help building your coalition, because at least subconsciously they'll recognize, well, they asked for my opinion. It was sincere. It wasn't, this is what we're going to do this year, and I need you all to accept it. So getting their input may also help with building the coalition. So there's a lot of good information in here about coalitions. Thomas, William, go ahead.
Yeah, Jeff, one of the things that I've always found, not just in our club, but in personal life, is you sort of have to resonate or regulate, I guess would be a better word. There's always a group of people who tend to drown everybody else out. They know what's best. They've done it before, been there, done that. Well, we live in changing times, so you need to regulate those voices as compared to the new suggestions, new dynamic ideas. Let's try this, and that mesh is always hard, I think, sometimes.
That is very true. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult for the old guard, if you will, to not be as involved as they were before, or things are changing and they don't like that. Whether it's Rio Grande Academy or pretty much anything, I love to get the input of new people, because they don't have a bias, they don't have a comfort zone, they bring their own perspectives, their own experience. I love bringing in new ideas from new people. The problem is a lot of other people don't want that. They just want things to go along like they've been doing it. And I think that's part of effective leadership, is to kind of get the club, whatever the word is, comfortable or resolute to the fact that change is actually a good thing if it's for a better purpose, not just for change's sake.
Great. Yeah.
I also like this other notion here about the benefits of open disagreement. as a facilitator, if I bring up a point or if one of the participants brings up a point and no one says anything, I don't really know whether they're agreeing or not. Mm-hmm. But I've been in situations where no one was disagreeing. Everyone was, sure, that sounds good, sure, that sounds good. And I thought, I don't know whether they're paying attention or not. I don't know if they're just waiting for the meeting to end or something. So I've actually disagreed with a group that I was sitting in, even though I agreed. I actually agreed, but I vocally disagreed because I wanted the group to have a discussion to kind of reinforce, are they really agreeing or are they just going through the motions? I like diversity and hearing different sides and then using that to kind of build consensus. So, at your leisure, please take a look at this. I think this is one of the really good inserts that is in this module. What we're going to do for about the next 15 minutes or so, there's 2 scenarios in this exercise. We're not going to do the first one, and I'll leave it up here in case you don't have a copy with you. But what I'd like for us to do, and Dom, you and I can be part of this as we are so inclined, but take a look at this scenario 2. Assume that is happening to our club and we're the leadership team and we've got to figure out what to do about this. So take a look at scenario 2 and then we'll discuss it. We'll take about a couple minutes to review it and then we'll discuss. Okay, have we all gone through it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, this is part of effective leadership strategies. So when we get to these questions about, can the club be saved and develop a plan, we want to think about whoever is leading the club at this point, how are they going to take whatever we come up with as a plan and how are they going to get some of these challenges addressed? So who would like to come up with what should be included in this plan? And I'm going to go ahead and, do you all have a copy of this?
I do.
Yep.
Thomas, do you have a copy with you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that and bring up another notepad so we can jot down ideas. All right, so what are we going to do to save this club and how are we going to use effective leadership to make this work?
Well, I think the first thing one has to do is find a person in the club who's dynamic enough to deal with the cliquish nature of the subset or group that seems to be set in their ways of we're exactly where we want to be. Now, who that is in the community and how you find that person and get them to serve, because they're going to be fighting that. They're going to be fighting against the status quo, but you need a strong personality and someone of equal size and nature of that clique.
So that's interesting. I think, Gail, you had pointed out in one of the projects at the Clovis Club that you found someone other than yourself to work with the club to get something done for whatever reason, whether it's because they had more experience, but you found that a person to kind of work on that, similar to this?
Yeah, similar. Ours was a project. It's actually a fundraiser.
Right.
And one of our members is a school, superintendent. So involving her in the need for this literacy program is where I used that. But it didn't really deal with the whole clique nature. And I tread lightly around that one as well. And I'm reading these and I'm thinking, you know what? I see this in our club, and I think we have a great club, mind you. And so I do have fears of disrupting the flow, if you will, or these cliques, because that's part of why those folks come, is they like sitting with those individuals. The thing I worry about is new members coming in sometimes feel left out or not a part of it.
Yep.
So
Do you think back? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't know how to address that without turning someone else off.
Yeah, Jeff, the clique will not collectively fix itself,
Right.
but the president or whomever has to individually go to the clique members, find what buttons need to be pushed for that member to help the change come from a little bit within. The clique won't change itself.
Right. Does anyone recall, because this actually goes to a lot of the membership discussions that we've had in RGA, the stat about 50% of Rotarians leave within 3 years of joining?
Retention issues, yeah.
And and part of it could be because when they join, there's this cliquish mentality and they don't feel comfortable in that. And after a while, they just feel, displaced and they're not part of the group and the clique doesn't absorb them. So, cliques can be problematic.
Well, Jeff, let me point something out to you. As a sergeant at arms at our club, once a month, I find people who have not sat at a new table that month. But the clique people don't seem to mind that because they'd rather pay the $1 or $5 than actually realize that the fine is intending to them to go and join another group.
Wow.
Network somewhere else.
Wow.
So they don't even self-rationalize that that's the problem.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Bill. Have you ever thought about asking them or finding them if they don't allow some newer member to sit with them?
Invite a newer member to sit with them.
Well, Dom, that'll be Wednesday's fine. Who hasn't invited somebody to sit at their new person to sit at their that'll be Wednesday's fine.
That's great.
A good idea.
Okay, good.
That's great. So the other thing that's interesting about this first part of the plan is that in order to find a person with a strong personality, we have to understand the membership. If I come in new, it's going to be really hard for me fairly quickly to find a person with a strong personality to deal with this. But if I have a year as president-elect, and I want to get Thomas's input on this, if I've got a year as president-elect to learn about the membership, who are the strong personalities? Who is that person that I can go to and say, hey, we've got this clique thing going on, and I don't really feel that comfortable addressing it. I think it would be a stronger case if it comes from you. I can figure that out during that year when I'm preparing. Thomas, I know your club is not that large, but do you know the people well enough that if you need someone to go in and kind of help make something happen, you have a pretty good idea of who you would call on for something like this?
Yeah, I do. And it's usually the people that are the quietest during the meetings, because when they talk, because they're quiet generally, when they do talk, people tend to listen.
That's interesting. Okay, excellent.
That's good.
But you know that because you've seen when they do talk, people listen, right? You're not assuming that. You've seen that happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've observed that. Yes.
That is, I can't stress it enough. President-elects, the most important thing they can do, other than, let's say, lead the big project, is observe and learn. And if they don't have a chance to observe and learn, then when they start taking on the role as president, they may not have this knowledge like we're looking at here about who are the strong personalities, who are the ones that the club will listen to. So observing and learning is so important for that president-elect year. Okay, what else do we need to do to save this club?
I think we need to find a project that everyone can rally around.
Well, I know it sounds sort of weird, but I think I'd like to conduct a survey and present the survey as a whole to the group, realizing the clique isn't the club. The clique is a clique within the club, and the rest of the members are a little dissatisfied. So if you have some empirical survey evidence that indicates that there's a lot of dissatisfaction, maybe the clique will do some self-introspection, possibly, but probably not.
Yeah, it very well could. Let's go back to the find a project that everyone can rally around, because that's interesting too. We talked before about sometimes we need to make a convincing argument to get the buy-in, that it may be hard to come up with something that as soon as I mention it, everyone says, Jeff, that's the greatest thing we've heard. You've got 100% buy-in. So maybe it's find a project that everyone can rally around if we can make a convincing argument. It may be really difficult to find something that everyone can rally around without persuading anyone, especially if we have a diverse group of people. But if we can make a convincing argument, maybe we can get that rally and support in that coalition, right?
Well, how about this, Jeff? Maybe the clique is a group of members who golf every Sunday together. Make them have them sponsor the golf tournament and see if that'll pique their interest.
We talked about the member survey too in some of the membership sections that we've done. The idea of getting a pulse of the club and sharing the results with the club. So it's not just for the leadership's information, it's also for the club to say, here's what you've told us, here's what you like. You're not going to get 100% of the club all wanting to do the same thing, but you can use that to kind of show people where they stand. So I think conducting a member survey would be great.
Well, Jeff, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for example, we just did conduct a member survey in October, and we found some interesting things. I'm still waiting for some action items to come out of that. It was presented to the board and presented to the membership, but was it just a futile project, or will there be something that happens from that?
Yeah. A member survey, you know, if you collect the data but you're not using it to do anything, it's not really that.
It's frustrating for us researchers when we present with great data, but yet nothing ever comes of it because it's the status quo over and over and over again.
What about this in our scenario, some members announced loudly, and I love that, announced loudly that we don't need more members, we have a happy, friendly group now, and more people will disturb that. So they're not even interested in growing the club. Forget about the clique. They're just happy with things the way they are. What do we do about that?
Keep adding members anyway.
So just go against the grain.
Well, you know, because again, people get comfortable. They get
Right.
comfortable, and they're comfortable in this setting and this surrounding, and that's why we end up with cliques, I think, too, as new members come in and they stick to the ones they're comfortable with.
Right. How do you make it convincing? Oh, sorry.
Let me interject a real life example of what's going on with this kind of club. I don't think the club in Silver City would mind me talking about this, but I'm fairly familiar with the situation. This club was exactly what we're talking about here. Cliques, everybody comfortable in where they were, what they were not doing. Didn't really feel interested in growing the club because they were a bunch of buddies having a good time. And some new blood ended up being in charge of that club and literally cleaned it out and suggested that maybe some of these members did not really want to be members of Rotary. If they wanted to be a bunch of buddies, they could do that over a cup of coffee on Wednesday morning. And they literally ran those people off. And today that club is half again the size it was 3 years ago.
Wow.
That's worst case. But you can save a club by literally tearing it down and building it back up again.
Call the herd. Yep.
Wow. Let's put last resort
It's a last resort. You're absolutely right, Jeff.
to build it back up. You know, it's interesting when we fill out these quarterly reports as assistant governors that go to the district governor. That's some of the information that the district governor would want to know. Not we recommend that this be done, but there are cases when the district governor says we need to do something drastic. You know, we tried other things and it wasn't working, so sometimes that has to happen. I'm looking for, there's one other thing I'd like to add, but I also want to hear from Thomas if I haven't heard from you yet. It's more of a question. Again, going back to leadership styles and strategies, do we think that what needs to be done is going to happen quickly, or is it going to happen more over time?
I think it's going to happen more over time.
So if it's going to happen more over time, what does that suggest about the leadership strategy that you're going to use?
Well, you better be persistent and calculated in terms of planning and understanding all the dynamics of where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Right. And it also suggests, I think, that you're not going to try to ram something through real quick to solve this problem.
Correct.
That your strategy is start breaking down the cliques, start planting seeds that may start to have an effect, but don't look for the immediate solution if the sense is it's going to take a while. I mean, a lot of times, and maybe this is not the best analogy, but people that have chronic health issues, they didn't develop those chronic health issues overnight. They developed over time. And so typically what the doctors will tell people with chronic health conditions is, you didn't get these health conditions overnight. You're also not going to resolve them overnight. So the plan is to resolve it over time because they were likely building up over time. And maybe that is a reasonable notion here. If those cliques didn't just start, pop up overnight, maybe it's going to take some time to break them apart as well.
You know what you might be talking about, Jeff, is a small coalition that understands the problem, is willing to make the change. And you're talking in terms of a president-elect and possibly some future presidents that are willing to go through this process of making change that you are going to initiate, because that process is going to follow through during future tenures of the president-elect and those that follow behind he or she.
You know, Jeff, I love these discussions because it starts getting your mind thinking and ideas pop into your mind. And I wonder if a mentor program might be something that could help push its way into some of these cliques.
Yep.
Most of the time, and what I see in our club, and again, I appreciate that they come because they want to associate with their friends. I appreciate that, and I don't want to take that away. But I don't want new people to feel invisible. I want them to feel embraced by everyone, including the cliques. So I wonder if going to these cliques or these people and asking them if they wouldn't be a mentor for some of the newer members, what it's going to do, I think, is it's going to help them see that, gee, they're pretty cool people. They're not so bad.
Yep.
That's a good idea, Gail.
Excellent.
I've made a note. I'm going to do that. See, I'll report back how it works here.
Yeah. We only have a couple minutes left. Is there anything else about this particular scenario? Otherwise, we'll just kind of do a recap before we go to the last session. Anything else about this? I also appreciated, Gail, your observation. This to me is the strength of the Rio Grande Academy, is that we have a chance to think about scenarios. Some of them may be relevant. Some of them may not be relevant as is, but we can think about something that's comparable. And really, this is a leadership institute. So even though we're also training people more about Rotary, we're also saying, in terms of leadership, how can we be more effective? And to think about things like this, instead of just stepping in and saying, July 1st, here I am. It's how do we really prepare and get a lay of the land and use that understanding to help the club move forward. Otherwise, I may have all the great ideas in the world, but if I can't build a coalition and if I can't make convincing arguments, not only will nothing happen, it can actually be detrimental.
I had a situation years ago when I was the marketing director for a bank of an executive vice president whose attitude was, be reasonable, do it my way. That is not how to run a Rotary club.
No, it is not. No, it is not. I remember my first year in Rotary, which was only 5 years ago. A couple of members said to me, they said, one of the things you're going to learn is that because we're all volunteers, if we're not happy, we're going to leave. Because we've got many other things we can do with our time. And that notion about, that fragile notion about membership is really important. People are not getting a paycheck. They're doing it because they believe in something about this group of people. And I think that's actually sometimes even more challenging because they may leave. And like that club in Silver City, maybe the group decided, maybe it's better in the short term for people to leave and to start with a smaller group that's really bought in and then over time build it out. So I think that does make it quite a bit challenging. Any other takeaways before we end this session? William, go ahead.
No, I was just going to think the same thing, that the fiscal responsibility of the club, you can't often just have people leave if they're not buying into everything. You need that ongoing fiscal responsibility, even though they're not satisfying everybody or they're not satisfied. But you just can't ask people to leave all the time. That just doesn't always work.
That's right. there's no one size fits all solution, right? Every club is different. The leadership is different. The membership, every case is different. So, anything else before we take a break, or if you don't need a break, we'll dive right into international service. Anything else about this? All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thomas, were you okay? Are you still with us? I only ask because I can't see your face.
I'm still here.
Cool, excellent. All right,